Let's take a look at the services section of the client record. It is important to point out that services added within this section are not linked to billing. Therefore, any service that is associated with the client here must be a service that is ineligible for billing. Otherwise, the service will never get billed. Billable services are currently linked to authorizations in OnTarget Backoffice in the Service Authorization screen. Adding services within the client record is a useful tool for linking non-billable services. For instance, you may want to track client no-shows on the scheduler so that you can track the number of times they don't show up for appointments. Since that code is not billable, that is a great example of when to use this section of the client record. It is also important to note that the service must be ineligible for payroll as well. If you happen to see any services attached to the client, and when they are grayed out, as in this example, that means that those are authorized services. They were set up in Backoffice under the Service Authorization screen. These are not editable fields. They are only for display so that you have a reference as to what services the client may be authorized to receive. Any service that is added directly in this screen will not be grayed out as such and will be open for editing, as you will see in just a minute. Now that you have that information, let's add a service. Click on the Add Service button. The first drop-down box is where you will select the service. The list of services available for selection are pre-configured within the Configure desktop. This is done within the List Configure section under Services, Service Masters, and State Services, and is covered in more detail in another training video. The next drop-down is for Service Funder. Although this is a required field, Service Funder is of less importance for non-billed services. This is pulling the funding source ID number from the Insurance tab of the General section in the client record. When the Enforce Employee Validation checkbox is checked, the system will perform a validation check to see if the client is linked to the employee. This validation check is most useful at the scheduler, as it will prevent you from scheduling an employee to work with the client if the proper credentialing is not first in place and the client is not linked to the employee roster. The warning message alerting you to the fact that the employee and client are not linked is thrown at the scheduler, the notes, and at billing. As with all validations, securities for each role determines if this particular message can be overridden or not. The link to the client and employee is managed under the employee record in the Roster tab. Next, you will enter in the start date and the end date, as these are both required fields. The service is only eligible to be used within the Enter Date range. For example, if the end date is 12/31/2014, the service will not be eligible for use starting January 1st and forward. This is a great point of control as it restricts the usage within a desired time frame. The no-show service might not be a good example of when you may need to restrict a service, as you might want that to always be linked to the client in order to track no-show appointments. But other services may benefit from controlling the dates in which the service can be used. The final two fields in this section are for minimum units required and authorized units. Again, it is important to point out that because services added here in this section are not linked to billing, putting values in these fields will be for reference purposes only. Should you have any questions, please contact our support team by going to Options, Support, and Contact Support.